That's awesome. Yeah, dude, your avatar is awesome.
Yeah, that's a cartoonist's impression of me.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it looks a little bit like Shaggy from Scooby Doo.
You're not actually the first person to say that. To do the same.
Yes, sweet.
I think it's the chin because it's like a bum chin, you know.
Oh no, I would say you kind of got that. What's that guy that's always in those movies? I forget what his name was, but yeah, he's a popular actor in California right now.
Oh, wicked. Okay, fair enough. Okay. So how are you today, Frank? I understand it's quite early in the morning for you.
Yeah, it's a little bit early, and I was at work till 2 a.m. last night. We're cranking on a lot of cool stuff, so yeah, it's good to be here for sure.
I really appreciate that, actually, because I'm not a big name in interviewing people yet, but I hope to one day be quite good at interviewing people. So.
Yeah, and yeah, same for me too. I hope to be good at being interviewed. So I'm not necessarily a public figure, but I want to definitely start becoming more social as far as getting my artwork out there and interfacing people in more of a public forum. Our industry has there's a lot of perks to it, but there's also a lot of negative things in the sense that you're just in an office all day.
Yeah, I imagine so. And I would really like to touch on what you're currently working on now, but if we sort of shape this conversation chronologically, so we begin with the earlier stuff and end up with the later stuff, if that's good with you?
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Okay, so basically the way I like to do interviews is I don't have set questions because I don't think they're very organic and they always come off a bit stunted when you're sort of asking specific questions. So I thought we'd just have a conversation and see where it goes, yeah? Yeah,
sure. Sounds fine.
Okay, brilliant. So I think the first question we should ask is, who are you? What do you do? And
my name is Frank Capezzuto. I'm in the video game industry. I am currently a concept artist in the industry. I actually started off in the industry as what everyone did in the industry at the time was being a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
It was always my intention growing up as a kid, watching Blade Runner, Ghostbusters, Star Wars, Star Trek, all those movies that sort of shaped my childhood, and playing video games, Commodore 64 video games. At the time, I wanted to build miniatures for movies, of all things. I wanted to do something physical because that's how everything was done back then. Is that you would actually build your miniatures and film them in front of a blue screen. Okay. And when I got older, the video game industry started to catch up. Like even in the late '90s, they were doing full video, and the same process of building miniatures and doing things with like matte paintings and all those techniques were being used in the video game industry. And it was a sort of a no-brainer at that point for me to try to put those two passions together, my love of games and my love of movies, and go into video games. At the time, the industry wasn't quite mature enough to really support many specialists, so you had to learn so many different aspects, from modeling to painting to I didn't do really a lot of scripting, but you had to interact with the engine and do tables and hook up your effects and work with the programmers and do the perf and make sure that your assets weren't too complicated. And the first game I worked on was FreeSpace, that was I got my first job out of Art Institute of Pittsburgh. I got an offer from Parallax Software at the time, which was in Champaign, Illinois. But like the fact that I had an industrial design background because their first game was all about vehicles.
Okay.
So when I got the job there, I would have that ability to conceptualize the spaceships, build them, put them in the engine, make sure that the geometry was clean. So there was a very video games at the time. We had to really scrutinize our models and our geometry to make sure that it was as clean as possible to run within the engine. Because even back then when they were modeling, say 1993, when they were modeling the dinosaurs for Jurassic Park, to some degree you had to worry about perf, but obviously they could render as high res as they wanted because it might take 2 hours to compute a frame. Whereas, you're doing a video game, you have to run it at 30 to 60 frames a second. And that was right before hardware came out, so everything was done in software back then. All the effects and all the blending was done in software. So,
okay.
But yeah.
Okay, well, so you mentioned that you worked on FreeSpace, so this was back in the early days of Volition Inc, yeah?
Yeah, that's what we were known as Parallax at the time. It was like 13 people.
Oh, right, okay. Because I've spoken to your friend Scott Lay.
Yes.
And I understand that he came in a little bit later when you were Volition, yeah?
Yeah, he came after the fact. I believe his first game that he worked on was Summoner, and I think he may have done music for FreeSpace too. But I know he did soundtracks, audio, composing for Summoner.
Did you personally work on Summoner?
No, I only did a little bit of support work in the beginning, which is pretty interesting. That was sort of like a interesting time for the company because we were moving from a one project to a two project company.
Yeah.
And they had what was called they're trying to figure a way to have like a centralized tech that would support both projects, and they had this thing for a while. It was called the VSTK, and that supported us for a little while. And then when we separated to a two project company, I went more toward the Red Faction team, and other people then at that point went to the Summoner team based on their interests. And since I was a very hardcore vehicle fiction guy, it just made sense for me to move over to Red Faction 1.
So could you tell us a bit about what it was like working on Red Faction?
It was really, it had its highs and lows, because around that time I wanted to start specializing in concept art, but there's still enough in the industry that the benefits are that you would be able to touch your feet in many different ponds, I guess. We had like 6 months to build a geometry editor, and so you had to definitely support the programmers at that point and help build an editor in the sense that more of like a QA tester and usability, and you'd also spec tools. Like I didn't actually program what would happen in the editor, but I would definitely be using it. Also help develop like the effect system, the particle system. That's where I concentrated most of my effort at the time. And we hired this guy called Matt Boynton, who then took over. He did most of the other stuff, editor stuff, and then we got Mark Lewis and a bunch of other level guys in. And then that was a cool project because it was, I think, still to this day one of the only projects where you could do what we were calling geomods, which were actually real. We're doing booleans in real time, and you aware what booleans are?
I'm actually not. I'm not an arty person, and I'm sure loads of people won't. So why don't you explain? Yeah, what they are?
Yeah, it's really cool though, because a boolean is when you take two pieces of geometry, and I'm approaching this interview like an artist or like somebody who's been in the game industry. So hopefully I don't bore people, but it's where you're able to. And you can use it for a lot of modeling, but it's where you take two pieces of geometry and you intersect them together, and you can actually cut holes. You're basically carving away at geometry like you would chipping away at wood or using a chisel at wood.
Okay.
And that is a very math intensive operation. But Red Faction 1 was one of the only games where you could do real time geometric deformation. So if you would shoot a rocket launcher, it would actually take out chunks of the wall. So that was pretty cool. But that led us into some very interesting situations. And there's so many other more just genius people on the team that were able to deal with that, because you would end up with what we call soft crashes, where you would where the player would be able to geomod themselves into a big ditch, and they would run out of ammo and they couldn't get back out.
All right. Okay.
So it was constantly things like that we had to deal with. Also pathfinding. There's another guy, James Sy. He was really good at scripting and doing like the pathfinding. So we had to deal with so the actual players themselves could move around the level. You would have to set these pathfinding nodes, which we would always. It's difficult to do a game with pathfinding, even in a static environment.
Yeah.
Because you play all these other games where you'd be escorting somebody in a zombie mission, and you're like, "Where's the guy?" And then you would turn around, and he's like stuck on a light pole, just running into the light pole.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a cool project. We were able to do a lot of stuff, and it got really good reviews. It was really reviewed well, and we have really cool multiplayer. And the geomods themselves allowed the players to modify their environment and create their own cover, essentially.
Yeah, okay. And did you work on Red Faction 2 as well then, yeah?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so, how did you actually start working? Could you tell us more about how you, was Volition Incorporated your first company you worked for, or when it was, the previous name? Was that the first company in the gaming industry that you worked for?
Absolutely, yeah. That was the first job I got out of Art Institute of Pittsburgh.
Okay, was there much competition into getting that position?
Dude, seriously, the video game industry back then was so much more relaxed. There's so many, like, you hear all this stuff right now with the VFX solidarity movement and how a lot of the video game companies are shutting down. And I don't necessarily think that the industry is getting worse, but I think its dynamic is changing. But back then, it was just ramping up. A student would be getting job offers from good, because I was getting, the economy was different in the late 90s. I know that I saw from a different perspective back then, but at least to me it was exciting because I grew up. I wasn't rich growing up for sure, and to go to school, and then I worked in a video store before I got a video game industry through college. But going through college, I went to 3 years of was considered vo-tech school, which isn't really glamorous education, but they had everything there to teach you. And I was only halfway through school, and all students were getting job offers back then. And it was, you would get like $30,000, $40,000 a year starting salaries because the video game industry was hungry to get people. And back then it was different because all the teams would get structured for full-time positions. So there wasn't any of this, like, what's that new movie with Vince Vaughn, where they're going to Google? It's like, oh yeah, it's like, well, we could get an internship that possibly could lead to a full-time job. It wasn't like that back then. You would just get a full-time job.
So the way that the dynamic of the gaming industry has changed, do you think you're saying that it's a lot more competitive now than it used to be?
I think in certain ways, yes. I think it's competitive on a global market because I don't think outsourcing has, at least from anybody's perspective, I don't think outsourcing has changed the industry where it's like, oh, it's just destroyed the industry in the whatever part of the world because there is that fear. Because you're always going to need full-time people that are in-house.
Yeah.
But as far as the outsourcing goes, there's definitely tax incentives to do operations on any kind of creative industry. Like I know Vancouver in Canada has tax incentives, and I think it's really where the tax incentives are.
Yeah.
And cost. But I think at the end of the day, it's a creative industry, so if there's a company out there that's looking for really good fantasy art, they're probably gonna go with the artists that they like. And the rates are actually becoming relatively standardized. I know some places are a lot cheaper than others, but I think it's really just like who you like. I'm a huge fan of Sid Mead, the futurist concept artist. He's worked on Blade Runner and Tron.
Okay.
If somebody's a Sid Mead fan, they're going to go to Sid Mead just because it's creative. I mean, it's an emotional decision. So I think it's keeping things balanced.
Okay. Well, I'm on your website right now, fc3concepts.com, and I can see that there's definitely a big science fiction element to what you do. The art is fantastic as well. I have to compliment you on.
Oh, thank you.
What you do. So, growing up, what were your sort of interests in science fiction? Are there sort of TV shows you're into? I know you mentioned a few earlier, but could you explore a bit more of your sort of influences on your art?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in a single parent family. My mom raised me, and I think she had a strong artistic influence growing up. And so in plus it was like she would work. And so there would be, like, I guess I would be called a latchkey kid at that point. Have you ever heard what that is?
It might be an American term.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, what is in England whenever it's maybe a single a kid being raised by one parent, but the parent's working a lot or out of the house, and so the kid comes home alone. And that's why I call him a latchkey kid, because you have your house keys.
Yeah.
So I in that sense, it was just escapism at that point. I didn't grow up in wealthy families, so it was definitely a way to deal with the problems growing up as a kid when your parents weren't always around, and you didn't necessarily have a lot of money. So, but at the point I had enough money to have a Commodore 64,
Yeah.
which definitely helped formulate my childhood. And it was just, I grew up with movies. Just watching, just staying up late at night. My mom was really cool about me staying up late. But sometimes I would just sneak out and nobody would be, my mom would be sleeping. I would sneak out, turn on the TV, and then like Star Trek, the motion picture would be on. And I would stay up to 2 o'clock in the morning watching that. And then I'd be sitting there watching a movie and I'd be drawing. And I try to just draw what I see in Star Wars and, A Big Trouble in Little China. That was one of my favorite movies growing up. And just all these things just sort of influenced me growing up. And it was cool. My friends supported it, and the community that I was in supported it. They saw that I had a knack for it, and I definitely got support from my family in that. You always hear these stories of, kids, their parents are trying to push them into becoming a lawyer or this or that. The thing with my family, they were really supportive when I did. So it's just everything just sort of came in line. And, yeah.
That's excellent. And, so as an artist, were you always sort of scribbling from a very young age, or is art something you kind of realized you were good at a bit later on?
I tell you what, I was scribbling at an early age, and I wasn't sure if it was exactly because my mom was an artist as well, like I said earlier, and I don't know if I can't remember first few couple years of life. It's just kind of a blur, but I think she really just kind of pushed it on me in a sense where, not in a bad way. She was just like, hey, could you try to draw this thing or try to draw the radio? And I just kept on doing it, and I just picked it up. And ever since I can remember, I was drawing, and especially I would always do the flip books. So I would get the little Post-it notes, and I'd be drawing little guys running around and doing karate moves and stuff.
You mean like the sort of ones where you kind of flick through and the image changes? Yeah.
Yeah. And she'd be like, hey, where do my sticky notes go? It's like, she wouldn't get mad, but she would love the fact that I would just be drawing pictures everywhere.
Yeah, no, it sounds really creative, and it's really nice that as well that she supported you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, so after working on bringing it back to the gaming industry in particular, after working on Red Faction, I believe you moved over to Bungie. Yeah.
Yeah. So like when I completed school and I went to Volition, I was there for 6 years, mm-hmm. And it was around that time I saw the Halo 2, the one of the early trailers for Halo 2, and it's a pretty simple trailer as far as context goes, but it's just a Master Chief. He's in an elevator. He has a gun. He walks out to the airlock, and it just hits the airlock, and he just gets swept out into space, and he lands on the Covenant cruiser, and that's what it's implying, and then the trailer ends.
Yeah.
And that was one of my favorite trailers that Bungie put out, and that just hooked me so much. And again, I guess what I was saying earlier about the video game industry, it's an emotional industry in a lot of ways, and I think that's why you see it's like the Wild West where there's these highs and lows, and you would see these huge projects come and go. Yeah, companies come and go. So it was an emotional decision. I had many good years at Volition, so it was just time for me to work on one of my favorite games, and Halo was one of my favorite games. So it was just at the right time, and I applied. And luckily, it was the most exciting call ever. I got a call from Marcus, who was the head honcho or the creative. I think he was the creative director at the time, or the one of the head artists. I don't know what his official title was, but he was the guy. He was the guy that designed the Warthog. He was the guy that helped design the Master Chief. And I'm like, wow, I just got a call from this guy. And that was so exciting. And I just talked to him, and he said, yeah, I dig your work, and we're looking for an environment artist. I did at that point in the industry. I really wanted to be a concept artist, because at that point it was maturing, and I was like, you start in the industry, you have all these different, you got to be an effects artist, you have to be a vehicle, a character, and you got to do animation, you got to do effects, got to do interface. Yeah. But I was deltaing in on that, and this job position was an environment artist, but I said I really like doing concept art. So they were like, well, you could do both. But all things considered, I was like, yeah, I'll interview, and yeah, there's a great bunch of guys. I was just like, what, do I wear a suit or what? They're like, no, just wear shorts. It's all good. They were the most creatively intense people that I interviewed or saw, but on the other side, they were just, it was like hanging out with your buddies. It was very uncorporate in that sense. And I thought, well, because you guys are part of Microsoft, and no, it wasn't that it. They've carved out they've kept their culture from Chicago completely intact. So it was great.
So with Bungie then, obviously when you got on board then, it was just Halo 2 hadn't quite come out then, yeah?
No, I was there about a year and a half before Halo 2 was released.
So you kind of, obviously Halo was very successful, but obviously after Halo 2 and 3 and the other ones came out, it became more and more successful. So did you anticipate when you started working for them how big Halo was going to be?
Well, I think in a lot of ways that's kind of my downfall, because I guess as an artist in the industry, it was purely emotional. I did not think about. I liked Halo not because how many units it sold. I liked Halo because of the world. It was a creative love affair, and I was just not thinking about how successful it was going to be. I was not thinking about salary. I was just like, man, I want a chunk of this universe. I just want to get in and build stuff, and for me, that's all it was. When the game released, and you would see people lining up in Best Buy, like a block out of the store to get a release of the game. It's like then at that point I realized it's like, oh, this is really big.
Yeah, well, I mean, Bungie, I would say, are one of the most hyped, biggest, best developers around at the moment. I mean, how does it feel to be? You still work for Bungie, don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. So how does it feel to be part of this developing team that is regarded really as both is incredibly critically appraised, but also loads of people love what you do.
Yeah, I am completely happy to be there. It's an amazing company. It's an amazing experience. I'm actually super happy now because I'm finally doing concept art full time, and yeah, it's just an amazing team. It's hard work, and you can't get married to what you do. In a sense where you might be working on it, there is a hard side to it where you might be working on a space and an environment, and even before when I was an environment, you might be working on an environment, and you know the stats come in, people aren't having fun with it. So your designer that you're working with could be might like the level. The writers might be on board. The perf might be okay, but then you get the playtest back, and people are getting lost in the level. So then you have to say, okay, well, this whole area is too symmetrical, and even though it's fun to build symmetrical spaces, we have to just blow out this whole side of the level. And, I mean, that's sort of the hard side of it, because you might have to have a build ready for the next playtest, and you might have to just work till midnight to get that done so the light maps can run. But definitely the highs are way more extreme than the lows in that sense, because just seeing the product getting out there, and to me the biggest thing is seeing the product in people's hands and seeing how much they enjoy it. And we also do a lot of stuff for I'm not directly involved with it. We have other people that handle it. Christine handles a lot of that, and Jen does a lot of. So we work a lot with Make-A-Wish.
Okay.
And to be able to have the kids actually come in and say, you know, when I was going through chemo, this game was the only thing, because the kids would make requests.
Yeah.
And they would set up an Xbox or whatever in the hospital room, and the kids would be like, you know, playing this game got me through these many dark hours of sitting there, you know, for 3 or 4 weeks in a hospital bed as my hair was falling out, you know, just like horrible stuff like that. But yet this game allowed me to escape. In a way, I bonded with that, because growing up and not having a lot of money, and I had different things, but growing up not a lot of money, and just the problems of going through high school and stuff like that, not being the upper echelon of the social, because I didn't have a lot of, and our high school was always about money. So for me, it was kind of escapism too. So at least in that, there was like an instant sort of understanding of, like, sometimes when people get in these really bad situations.
Yes.
Video games, books, comic books, movies can offer that sense of escapism where it can definitely help you get through some really tough times, and that to me was incredible.
I imagine it really would be. It sounds. I wasn't aware that you had the close connections with Make-A-Wish, but that's really.
Yep.
Obviously, Bungie's very. How big is Bungie at the moment? How many staff members?
I think we're definitely over 400 people. I don't know the exact amount. I'm not a PR guy, but there's a lot of people. It's just the nature of the type of game we're doing. It's over 400 people.
Brilliant, that's great. And does all the work take place in one studio, or is it spanned across multiple studios?
I'm not sure if I could really get into that too much, but we definitely have partnerships. I think just whenever you get into the industry, you build up partnerships with other entities that you have to work with. And even when Bungie was part of Microsoft, we had, I mean, there's just partnerships that you form while in the industry. Just like whenever they make a movie, they always have partnerships. So to what extent those partnerships are, I don't know if I have the knowledge to get into that.
Okay.
But there definitely are partnerships that get formed whenever you have any kind of a company on any kind of level.
Okay, so after, I think it was 2010, or I think it was when Bungie, I think Halo got taken by 343 Industries, is it?
Yes.
Okay, so you obviously aren't working on Halo anymore.
No.
How does it feel were you upset to see Halo go?
I don't think I was thinking about it that way. I think there's different team members that may have had different thoughts about that, but at least for me, I was really excited about the new project that we were working on, so I never really thought about it like that because I have faith in the creative leads of the company. And my job has always been, you give me your idea for the world, I'll visualize it. So in that sense, I never was in a position of saying, oh, I wish I could still work on Halo, or I don't have faith or have faith in it. It was just like I really like the genre that we're doing, and we're sticking to that.
Yeah.
I was just excited to visualize that world.
Well, before obviously you were tied with Microsoft, and now your publisher is Activision. Has there been a sort of difference from your level working with Activision to working with Microsoft?
For my level now.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe there's other people that have different views on it, but for me, I am so not a corporate guy in that sense. I go in, if I have my Wacom tablet, if I have the latest updated version of 3D Studio, the latest updated version of Photoshop, like, I'm all good. I'm simple like that. Like, I'm just like, I just worry about the art. And it's so easy in the industry to get caught up in the politics and what company is doing what, and this and that. And for me, it's just always been, I just need the art. I need somebody to tell me what the world and visualize or what they need help building. And again, for me, the most important thing is whenever the game gets out there to people and they're just like, they love it and they have fun, and that's the stuff that's important to me.
That's brilliant, because I've heard criticisms which I don't agree with, I've just got to say that, where people say that a lot of the time, I think it's because I suppose it's the bigger development teams, but some people get this feeling that the more mainstream and big the title, the less the sort of individuals working on it sort of care about the project, and I think you would strongly disagree with that, yeah?
I think that's an individual thing. You're going to hear people... well, because the thing is I always wanted to be in the movie industry, and from my perspective and my perception, I probably had more of a difficult time in the beginning of the industry than now.
Yeah. Because
in the beginning of the industry, I might get into doing vehicles, like, yeah, I'm going to have a lot of fun doing this, but then it's like, well, we need somebody to do interface. So you would have to, like, take that hat off and put on a completely new hat, and then you just be like, okay, I got to do interface for 3 months.
Yeah.
But at least for me, it's a gone set, because being a specialist, a little bit more of a specialist, I get to sort of you get a chance to carve out your role a little bit and really flesh out the details. And what's a really incredible thing about the industry right now is the hardware is getting to the point where it can help you fill that void, where the hardware is powerful enough to where you need somebody to actually figure out and design a suspension system in a car. You need industrial designers. You need clothing designers. You need, for that aspect of the video game industry, I mean, there's a huge movement in the indie games right now and cell phone games, which you're getting those what you would call a garage studio of like 10 or 12 people, and then that's going back to that. But for me personally, I love hard surface. I love science fiction. I love doing vehicles. I like doing concepts for Vine, and I'm getting more into illustration. And so far, Bungie and the industry in general on that facet is supporting my hunger to get into that and specialize in those fields. So I think in that sense, yeah, I'm sure you talk to 10 different people, they give you 10 different answers. But for me, my role, I'm like, I don't not necessarily care about what decisions are made for what type of project for. I mean, as long as it's science fiction or that genre. Yeah. But just come to me and tell me what you need help with visualizing. Like that's like think of it like of a Sid Mead role. When Ridley Scott came to him, he was like, I need you to pre-visualize what a futuristic city street or what the vehicles will look like in this universe, and that's the role I like filling. So in that sense, I love it. Yeah, basically.
And especially with Halo, and because obviously you said you've got a big interest in vehicles and movies, and Halo's an incredibly cinematic game, especially with all the cutscenes and just. Yeah. So I mean, I wouldn't off the top of my head be able to think of a developer that you would want to work for that would be which has got such a close connection to vehicles and science fiction. I think Bungie is the company to be with.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Absolutely. Okay, and I have to give a shout out to 343. They're an awesome company as well. They have talented people, and they I think they took Halo to the next level. So I'm definitely giving them props for when they were working on Halo 4. They did an amazing job with it. I had a good time with it. It was a fun game. It looked beautiful. So they definitely I have to give them props as well for what they did with Halo. They did a great job with it.
I've got a question for you about because when I spoke to Scott Lee, he did the soundtrack for some of it, but he hasn't really played the game very much. You, I imagine, being a Halo fan, get to obviously play what you've made, and I'm interested in, from your perspective as someone who works on the game, what's it like seeing it go from sort of its infant stage to being a full product that you can personally play, and do you enjoy playing Halo?
Oh, well, definitely for Halo. There were as an environment artist, and that's what I did most of my tasks with on Halo. It was definitely cool to see the environments, and there was a fun aspect to it, but there was also a frustrating aspect because an environment is this big organic entity that you may or may not be able to just say, like, you might have to say, oh, we're just going to do this and it's going to work, because it may not, because you're going to have to spend months play testing a level as it's being built. So there might be that frustration of the level's just not fun for months. And then maybe it's just a small tweak at the end. We're tweaking like the spawn points or moving the base over 60 meters and putting a rock divider can completely change the dynamics of a space. And then all of a sudden it's fun. So yes, absolutely. When you're dealing with, especially as an environment artist, it is key to actually play test in the game. I haven't been playing this game as much just due to the nature of it, but we definitely have these what they'll call them LAN parties, where you have the chance to actually make a build of the game and play it with other people. So that's definitely really, really fun. I enjoy doing it.
Wonderful. Okay, so in terms of a standard day then for you at Bungie, you walk into the office or whatever, and so could you give us an outline of what a typical day you would involve?
Step number one. Coffee.
Yeah.
that's the number one step. Before I even go to my desk, I get coffee. And, I sit down, and I'll usually just check over my emails, and I'll check with my leads to make sure that there aren't anything that's priority one, or I'll check with my producer. And then I usually have queued up 2 or 3 things in advance of what I have to do. And then it's usually a concept-ended role. And it might be like, well, we need to know what this shot looks like, or this device or this weapon. And our concept team, we get to work on different things, which is cool. So we might work on weapons, we might work on vehicles, we might work on environments. You might even spend a week just figuring out how a door is going to operate, because we have the budgets to do really complicated animations, even on doors. Yeah. So to figure that stuff out is really a cool thing. And so we'll just sit down, and I'll usually put in Pandora and just in the background, and just sort of what I call zoning out. And you just get in the groove, and it's just like you just go into sort of this time suck, And then next thing you know, your coworker or friend's tapping you on the shoulder, and it's like, oh, it's time to go to lunch. I'm like, wow, that was a nice trip, because you just get tunnel vision, and you just start going, and it's like a creative high. You just sort of, you get into it, and it's just such a fulfilling feeling. And then go to lunch and come back, and then same thing. And then I look at my clock, it's like, oh crap, it's 7 o'clock, I better go.
So do you work, what are your hours then? Is it 9 till 7 or?
That varies between people. I can work. Bungie has gotten a lot better with managing crunches. It was just the state of the industry in the early 2000s where you might crunch for 6 months straight. They are a lot better about it now. And I think a lot of times people are just self-motivated, so nobody is standing over your back saying, we need you to work 80 hours a week.
Yes.
It's just everyone loves the game, and I think everyone sort of gets in that time zone. You just are really into what you're doing, and the time just passes by really fast. Yeah, I don't. I'll have little pushes where I might work till 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes, but usually it's I'll get in at between 9 and 10, and I'll leave between 6, anywhere between 5 and 7, and they're really cool about it. It's not like when you hear a lot of these horror stories about the industry where they're like, oh, it's like, oh yeah, the boss was standing over my shoulder saying you have to work 80 hours a week or 9. It's not like that here. It's people are just really into what they're doing. And if they work extra, it's because they just want to put more love into something. And if somebody ever gets managed into a situation where they are and they see that, they'll hire somebody else. They'll make sure that people have a work-life balance. And I think that really has a lot to do with the team itself, a lot of the higher ups and a lot of the management, and they've been in the industry for a long time, so they know what it's like to not see your family for 6 months. Yes. So they're doing a lot better job of managing and minimizing any extended crunches, because I think in certain companies, I can't speak for Blizzard, but I know that they've been around for a while. I remember going to game conventions in the late 90s, and Blizzard was showing things, and I'm sure just even with their management there, I mean, they've been in the industry for a long time. And Valve, yes, they've been around for a long time, so I'm sure that they're a lot better about managing their crunches, because the guys that are running the company, they were 20-year-old ones too, and they know what it's not like to see your girlfriend or wife for 6 months.
Okay, so as an artist, do you get a big degree of creative freedom, or is it fairly sort of specific what you have to draw?
Yeah, in a sense, I can't give a solid answer for that, other than it really depends on the task. Usually in the beginning of a project, you're going to have like a blue sky phase where it's just pie in the sky. You're just swinging for the fences, just creating big images, epic images, to try to sell an idea or inspire people. But later on down the development cycle, they might be like, well, we need you to design the signage or logos on this door. So your task could like totally change from just big epic conceptual blue sky ideas all the way down to, we need you to figure out the bolt pattern on this, or we need you to figure out the wear pattern, or we need you to put decals on it and try to figure out how that goes, or this space here is a little bit too messy, so we need you to do quick paint overs of a relatively finished environment. So your task can just completely vary. But I think as creative freedom, once you have the direction, like this alien race does this and they look like this in general, like once you get that, you have a lot of creative freedom within brackets. Yeah. So you can move left and right or up and down, but not too far out of those brackets. Because then if you throw something at a time that's not appropriate, and then your peers will just be like, dude, what are you doing? We only needed this one thing. We need you to do color studies on the vehicle, not completely design a new vehicle. So it really depends on the task.
Yes, okay. Are there any specific assets in the games, that, like specific things that you've designed that people might recognize, or are you more of a sort of like a broad, general kind of artist?
On Halo Reach, I did a lot of the UNSC stuff. So a lot of the UNSC hallways. I've done a lot of Forerunner, which was the alien race. We had the UNSC, we had the Forerunner, we had the Covenant. I did a lot of Forerunner stuff. On Halo 3 DLC, there was a map called Orbital,
Okay.
It was a space station map. I forget that. I think that was the actual official name for it, because we usually have an internal development name for it, and I always refer to maps as that. And people are like, "What? That map wasn't in the game." But on Halo Reach there was it was sort of a boneyard for spaceships.
Okay.
And I do mostly polish related work. I'm not typically. I think every environment artist has to have their foot in understanding gameplay, but we have it pretty well divided where we have more gameplay minded or technically minded artists laying it out, because at that point you might be throwing boxes around like a box level for like 6 months and just trying different layouts, and that's not really where my interests were. My more interests were is once that mass out was complete, I would go in more of a beautification pass. So
yes.
But definitely back on Halo 3, we would build a whole, like one person or a couple people would build a level from start to finish. So those maps I did was Orbital, which is the space station map from Halo 3 DLC, and I forget what pack that was actually from. And on Halo 2 there's a map called Turf, which is a blown out section of the city, which was I think it was mostly a territories map. Those were like the two ones that I did mostly myself. But usually you're collaborating with other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So. But wait, let me think real quick. But I'm just trying to think of one of the big areas. I did a lot of the stuff, the ONI, which was Office of Naval Intelligence on Halo Reach. I've done a lot of the ONI and did polish. And there was a map called Sword Slayer that I did a lot of support work for. So yeah, that was like I did a lot of UNSC, ONI, and Forerunner stuff.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like your opinion on some of the popular culture that has come out of Halo in particular. So, do you have an opinion on Rooster Teeth's Red versus Blue?
I think that's great. I think that whenever you have a like what we call mothership industry that can spawn other creative industries, I think that's a beautiful thing in a relationship. And I tend to see that more with movies. I tend to see that a little bit less than a lot of movies, but then there's always the exception, like the Star Trek and Star Wars community, and just being able to see that actually give back. And I know that there's I can't give an exact number, but there's quite a handful of people at Bungie that were part of the community before they were part of the community before they even became part of, we saw, it's like, wow, these people are working on this really good mod, or they're working on the really good this or that, and they actually work for the company now. So the actual mod community can generate some really good people. I mean, think of like for Valve, for instance, the Team Fortress was a community mod, and then DayZ was the one for Arma, which I actually played that DayZ for Arma 2. Yeah, a lot of these, the industry can inspire mod groups to create some really nice games, like almost standalone games on themselves, and a lot of times that these companies can bring them in. I know Chaos Studios, whenever they did the Desert Combat mod for Battlefield 1942, they got turned into Chaos Studios. Well, they're not around anymore, but sometimes that happens. But yeah, in general, it's great to see that. I mean, we go to Comic-Con or we'll go to a Penny Arcade Expo, and we'll see these people with these elaborate costumes that they build in their house. And he's going around, the guy dressed up as Master Chief, and he's got lights in the costume, and everything's working. He's built this battle rifle, and from the media releases we've already had for Destiny.
Yes.
The people are already building. They're already doing fan art. They're already building weapons just from looking at the screenshots of movies that we have on YouTube. So to see people get excited like that, it supercharges you.
I imagine it would. I'm going to ask you a little bit about Destiny. Obviously, I know you can't talk much about Destiny, but I'll ask you about Destiny in a minute. But before that, so when you're at conventions, do you often get approached by fans, or do you get many fans personally reaching out to you? And if not, would you like more people to reach out to you?
In a sense that I'm really good with, if a fan comes up to me and asks me questions like, yeah, thank you for making a good game, and can you sign this? Or one time I went to a convention and there was a fan that actually, I had a table and they actually came up to me and said, you're one of the main reasons that I'm in the industry right now, is because I'm a total fan of your artwork. And then they handed me was one of the art books of Halo, and they opened it and says, can you sign all your drawings in the book?
Wow.
And that was like the greatest thing ever to actually inspire somebody to be in the industry.
Yes.
And to have games that people have fun with. But here's where I really shut down. When people start asking me official questions about the game or whatever, and I don't keep up with all of that, I'm just like, go to the webpage, go to www.bungie.net, or talk to Pete Parsons. Those guys do a way better job than I could ever do of doing that outward facing interface with the fans and community about what's going on with the game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of video games, apart from Halo, which we know you clearly like and enjoy working on, what sort of games have you been playing recently? Are there any games you've been playing recently?
Yeah. Well, here's one of the biggest misconceptions about the industry. A lot of times is that we have a lot of time to actually play games, which we really don't. I'm lucky if I get 5 or 10 hours a month, if that, to actually play outside games.
Wow.
Yeah, because my wife is awesome, and the video game industry definitely could, in some circumstances, could keep you might be away from the house for a long time. It's not as bad. I don't know. I've been watching all these documentaries on wrestlers like WWE and WWF, and you hear these guys that are on the road for like a year. It's not like that, but there are times you're just really busy, and the time you're like, okay, I've been working on a video game for 10 hours. I'm out of work. I want to see my wife. I don't want to sit down and play more video games. I did that in my 20s. I'm almost 40 now, so. So in the 5 or 10 hours a month, if that I get for video games, I just finished Far Cry 3 on the Xbox.
Oh, wicked! Yeah.
I just finished Halo 4. I was actually kind of a late bloomer as far as playing that, okay. And so I've been playing a lot of Arma, and I've been playing some DayZ. Those are the games I've been playing last. But I'm not like one of those guys that says like, oh my God, I've been playing these 20 or 30 games. I just don't have the time for that.
Are you looking forward to the DayZ standalone when it comes out?
Actually, I don't know a lot about that. Or are they just releasing it?
They're basically, because of the popularity, they're turning it into the guy, I can't recall his name right now, but he's turning it into a proper full release, I believe.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'd be totally excited about that.
Yes, yeah. That's good.
As much as I loved Arma, it's just like, I think that one of the biggest things they need to do in a video game, and this is just a heart-to-heart thing, they got to work on the AI. I swear, when I was playing that game, I loved Arma 2. I could not finish the last mission on a standard campaign because at some point the AI just totally craps out, and you're like, get in a line formation, and the guys are like, yes, sir, and they're like just standing there. Earlier in the mission, it would work beautifully, but it's just a bug with the AI. The pathfinding would just crap out. You'd be like, move to that tree, and they'd be like, yes, sir, and they would just stand there. I'd be like, okay, well, follow me, and they'd be like, yes, and I'd be walking, and I'd turn around, and there's like a BMP shooting me, like railing me, and I look behind me, the guys are still standing back at the town, and it's like, really? But I think the industry. I think graphically we're definitely getting to that point where you could throw twice as many polygons on the character, and that's great, but you're really not going to notice that much the visual. The difference between 32-bit and 64-bit. You're not really going to notice that color change because I can only discern so many colors.
Yes,
but I really think they need to work. Just the industry as a whole, like AI has always been. You always hear people when they do game reviews, they're like, the environment looked great, but the AI was stupid. Like, you always see that in games. Yeah. Like, just in general, it's like, God, they really need to fix AI games. I know it's a hard problem. I'm an artist. I couldn't contemplate how to solve that. But, and I think that's one of the things that people really liked about Halo is that the AI was really good. Like, you didn't really see problems where people were getting hung up, or Marines were just running off into the water and dying, or where things that you see in so many other games. But I got off track there.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Okay, so briefly touching on Destiny, I understand that it's quite hard from your position to talk about Destiny because it's not actually a huge amount has not been revealed about Destiny yet, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
In terms of questions, I mean, I don't know what I can actually ask you about Destiny, and if it's best just to avoid asking about Destiny. I guess essentially just we can expect more kind of sci-fi from it, yeah?
Yeah, if you go to the webpage, that explains everything about the game, and it's this It's a sci-fi game, and I know more has been released about that, but I'm like I said, I'm not equipped to know where I'm going over bounds because
Yes.
I wouldn't expect Pete Parsons to do concept art, but at the same time, I don't want to do Pete's job as far as like the PR stuff. So yeah, I'd rather just not get into the specifics. But like if you just go on Bungie, Bungie, www.bungie.net, the web team that we have at our company has just done an amazing job of encapsulating like a really nice audio video experience of digesting what the characters are about, with this, they're touching on the story. There's videos, there's some gameplay footage on there, and they would just do so much of a better job than explaining I would. I'd be like, oh yeah, you're this guy and you shoot things like.
But essentially, just from your perspective, then, so it's fun working on Destiny. It's more of what you love, and
oh yeah, it's great. It's a great ride.
That's brilliant. Okay, so I mean, from your perspective, you're looking to be with Bungie indefinitely for the future. Then they seem to be
absolutely. Everything that I've said about like how much I enjoy my job and like what I'm doing, absolutely. I really love what I do. I'm working with the very, very creative and talented. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm working with the best team in the industry." I'm not going to get into what company's better than other companies, but and for me to say, "Oh, I'm working with the best team in the industry," would be a little pompous on my side. But it's just for me, I'm working with awesome people. Let's just say that I'm working with very creative and talented individuals from all spectrums. We have great programmers, we have great audio guys, we have great sound guys. Yeah, and I just, matter of fact, just want to say, working with Scott Lee was awesome.
Yes.
Backtracking a little bit, whenever we were at Volition at the time, he definitely came in. He came in and brought. And Dan's an awesome audio guy too, but just having somebody come in fresh from California to just add some different vibes in the studio, I think was really cool. And he's one of those guys that can do it all. Matter of fact, he's a good artist. I've seen his compositing. He's done album covers. He's a good audio video artist. I mean, he could do it all. And his soundtracks were good. His composing was good. And again, I'm not even an audio guy, so I'm just gonna say good. I'm not gonna say the crescendo was amazing at this. It sounded good to my ears.
I mean, he's just branched out into doing Illuminite. It's like this new nightclub experience with all sorts of lights, and so he's a very visual person as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you don't necessarily find a lot of people that can completely bridge the spectrum of audio video, but he's in a sense where he's very creative visually. He's very creative with audio. And it was kind of funny little story when he just got there. So I don't think spending a lot of time in California, he had a lot of experience with snow and ice.
Okay.
And the vehicle that he had at the time was a rear-wheel drive it was a rear-wheel drive vehicle, and I believe the apartment complex, a lot of Volitionites, that's what we call them. We call them Volitionites, lived. That was called Gentry Square, and the parking lot it was a really bad snow and ice storm, and it was really treacherous. But I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where that's just the common.
Yeah.
So he pulled into a parking lot, and the rear, he just fishtailed the rear end of his vehicle, kicked out, and he did like a 360 on the ice, and his vehicle just snapped straight, and he just kept on driving like nothing happened. And we all pulled out, and I said, "Dude, that was awesome." You were like, it was before Tokyo Drift, but I would have said, I was telling Tokyo Drift. I mean, did you mean to do that? He was like, no. I was like, nice recovery, but it was just. He just pulled right in the parking lot, and his vehicle just did a 360, and all I just saw was he was just behind the wheel, and I just saw the vehicle spin around. But I guess I kind of caught, and he went right straight again, and it was like, you could have just told me that he did that on purpose, and I would have bought you beer or something, because it just seemed so effortless. He was just like, no, I was fearing for my life.
I've actually got a photo of that car that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think he was very interesting because before I spoke to him, he sent me about three or four different photos, and the car was one of the photos. So I think he views it as being quite important. Even back in the day, he was definitely a guy of a lot of gadgets. He always had these cool. He always had these crazy audio racks in his office, but I don't even know at the time. But this is before you would consider head units and sat nav. Dash kits, but yeah, he had a really, really nice rig in his truck at the time. I remember it had
I think at the time they weren't really doing full color, but I think it was an LED monitor, but you could see it would like play primitive video, and like for the time, like the guy was always like cutting edge as far as gadgets.
Yes.
Meanwhile, like in my Jetta, I had like the defaults, like it had like the tape that didn't work, and it like you would turn up the volume and the speakers would rattle, and it's like I never had any of the cool toys.
Okay, fantastic. And obviously your friend Dan, you mentioned. I'm trying to get an interview with that guy because I believe he's working on Injustice now, isn't he?
I've lost touch with him. I'm friends with him on Facebook, but as far as day to day, yeah, I've lost touch with him.
I think Scott's still friends with him. But either way, I'm trying to get talking to all sorts of people because I think it's fascinating just hearing from you guys.
Yeah.
But it's great. So, I mean, just coming to the end then of the interview, really, because I've had your time for about an hour, and I really appreciate you putting that.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. And I like I said, I want to become more of a social artist. I'm just hitting that age where it's just like, well, I'm still doing plenty of, spending hours and days in an office, but I want to start interfacing more with the community. So hopefully I wasn't too clumsy as far as, I was definitely a little bit nervous, I have to admit that, but hopefully I wasn't too clumsy, because I'm trying to work on becoming more of a outwardly interviewable person, if that's the correct term. Oh, and I do remember, because I was nervous in the beginning of the industry. Your picture looks a little bit like Owen Wilson. That's the guy.
Owen Wilson. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
I was so tongue tied at the beginning of the interview. I was just like, I can't, because it was just like, okay, don't get nervous, and I get on, and I kind of got a little bit tongue tied because I was just like, oh my god, my mind's going in 1,000 directions. Hopefully, I don't sound like too much of an idiot.
No, I mean, you've done a really good job. I mean, I think it's funny saying that because I'm actually like half your age, so
yeah. So yeah, no.
For you to say that you're nervous to me, I'm a lot more nervous than you are, I think, because I'm.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm. Like I said, when I do artwork, I just get in the zone and I don't think about it. It's just natural. But yeah, I feel really, and that's the thing that's cool about Bungie. I'm not really a meeting guy. I'm not a popularity contest guy. I just do my artwork. And Bungie's actually really good about that because they have a lot of genuine people there. So they're not. You hear so many stories just about the video game industry. You hear about just the huge egos. Jason Jones, he's one of the original guys at the company. He's like the coolest guy ever. He's just chilling out eating a salad, and you're like, hey, what's up? He's like, hey, what's up? He's like, everyone there is like really laid back, and I think that's the cool sort of the I don't know what I'm saying. That's the cool social interaction that's there, where people are just, they're really laid back personally, and you can go up and talk to them, but creatively they're really passionate about what they do, and I really do like that dynamic.
Yes. Okay, so I mean, I think finally the question I would like to ask you is, and it's obviously going to be very hard to answer because you've already acknowledged that the no. I don't know what you think I'm going to ask you. No. But
okay. I thought you were going to ask me. Oh, sorry. In my mind, I thought you were going to ask me about the game, and you said, "Oh, it's going to be really hard to ask me about the game." Okay.
Oh no. I've decided to not ask you any more about Destiny. That's fine.
Oh, okay.
No. That's fine. So all I was going to say is, and obviously the industry has changed, but would you have any advice for people who are trying to get into doing what you do?
The most important thing is find a good school, and that's what it comes down to. You find a lot of people that they want to bite into the game industry. They're excited about it, but they're not really sure where to go. And I just think the best thing is to go to this. I know in Seattle we have DigiPen up here, and I personally graduated Art Institute. You're going to find the simplest way I can put that in. You're going to find all the resources you need at a good school. I can't say what a bad school is because I've been out of the academic scene for a while. I mean, there was a period of 3 or 4 years when I was in the industry where I would go back to Art Institute with Parallax at the time to help interview people, so I had more of an intimate professional relationship with the school where I was more on track where academics were going in the art community. So I can't really say what the best ones are. Yeah. Or the worst ones are, but yeah, if there's an art institute that have a really good program, I hear good things about Full Sail and obviously DigiPen. I think that they're the best, and usually when you go into the school, they will give you a broad spectrum education. So for people who don't really know what they want to do, but they want to be in the video game industry, you're going to find everything there. But my advice to people, don't degree collect. Don't be like, well, I have a master's degree, so therefore I can get. The video game isn't mature like that. So get a degree with a school that will teach you what you need to know to get a job, but not necessarily don't have a wall full of plaques. That's not really going to get you anywhere in the video game industry. I mean, we've hired people at Bungie that don't have a lot of education because they're just prodigies. They're really good at what they do. So we're not really worried about it. But at the same time, just in my years of looking through portfolios, sometimes we might have somebody that has an impressive resume and these certificates and all these things that they did, but then you look at their portfolio and like, well, it's either not good or it's just not what we need, because we've had just in the past in doing this, we've had people send us to, it could even be something as simple as we're doing a science fiction game, they're sending us a portfolio of dragons. It's just, well, it's not really right for us. So sometimes you need to get a little, I can't even, like, think of a company as like a fan. Like, make it emotional, because I think that the company will be able to detect that. If you have a custom-made portfolio, and then you also have, like, when you get through school and you're looking for a job, this is the stage I'm talking about. When you have a custom portfolio, write a letter, do research on the people of the team to make sure they're right for you. Also the age. You're going to find video game industries are the 40-year-olds, and you're seeing video game industries of 20-year-olds, and that's an important thing. So if you really identify with the image and the social aspect of the company, as well as a personalized letter, taking the time to research who the management of the company is and hand write letters, and that goes a long way, because you get a lot of form letters, and you're going through like 30 or 40 portfolios, and like, yeah, another form, but when you have a applicant who has a letter handwritten, taking the time to do that, or even if it's typed, that's personalized to you and saying, yeah, I was a fan of your work and this and that, and I followed your games, and my family gets together and plays Halo or whatever, Destiny, whenever it comes out. That's going to really make that portfolio stand out, and also if the work is in line with what you do. So as a student, a lot of times they'll get out of college and they'll just be like, okay, I'll just send out my portfolio. No, say, no, you've got to research the company. Like, before I even applied to Bungie, I researched what Marcus was, I researched Jason, I researched the game, the history of the studio, to see if you're not interviewing at the studio is also interviewing at you. It's a mutual application process. So
yeah,
for a student that really, really likes doing fantasy games, just don't get a job doing sports games just to make a salary, because they're gonna sense that you're not really passionate for it. And that's really important in a creative industry, to make sure that the person is just really adamant about being super passionate about that company's mission and what they do, not just, I need a job, or the definite thing. Like, I don't know why people do this. So many times in the industry, you'll see people come and they're like, why are you applying at this job? They might get to the end, it's like, well, my last boss was a jerk. It's like, no, the number one thing you don't do is badmouth the previous employer. Yeah. And you can sense that. You can, even if they don't say that, you can sense it with the body language and how they put things together and their interests. But I've only worked at two jobs in the video game industry since 1996. So I've been fortunate where I've only had 2 jobs, and I think that it shows, and that's why I've gotten interviewed. Not that I'm not tactful like Brad Pitt or George Clooney. I'm tactful with my art, but like my communication and talking, I get real passionate and I go off in a million directions and just talk. So I'm not a PR guy, but I think that there was a sincerity that whenever I applied to Volition, I wanted to work on their next game. And then when Halo came out, it was an emotional decision. I wanted to work on Halo. And that's why I was able, not that I have any great interview technique, it's just they could just sense and sincere. So be sincere what you're going to do and who you want to apply for, because it is a very emotional industry. It's getting more corporatized, but it's an emotional industry. It's like the Hollywood tabloids that you read. It's just like, well, this star had a crush on that star, and she didn't care about her reputation. She just, chased this other guy, and then they ended up in a relationship or whatever. That's what I'm saying. It's an emotional decision.
Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, Frank, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. I think you've it's been inspiring, it's been interesting, and I think you interview better than you think you do.
Oh, I appreciate it. I'm just like, you asked a question of like seeing in a million directions, and so yeah, hopefully I did an okay job and didn't talk too much about things that weren't necessarily applied to the question.
Okay, all right. Well, nice seeing you then, Frank, and you take care. Okay.
All right, you too. All right.